The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet streets of a small town just outside Atlanta. It was one of those rare Saturdays when the world seemed to pause, letting people breathe a little easier. Birds chirped lazily from nearby trees, and the faint hum of lawnmowers drifted through the air. In his driveway, Charles Whitman leaned over the hood of his prized possession, a gleaming black 1967 Ford Mustang. The car was more than just a vehicle. It was a piece of history, a relic of an era when craftsmanship mattered above all else. Charles wasn't your average car enthusiast. With his tailored shirts and expensive wristwatch, he looked more like someone who belonged in a boardroom than under the hood of a classic muscle car. But that was part of what made him unique. Despite his wealth, which came from years of smart investments and running a successful tech company, Charles had always preferred getting his hands dirty. He found peace in tinkering with engines, the rhythmic clinking of tools against metal soothing his restless mind. Today, however, peace eluded him. Something was wrong with the Mustang. No matter how many times he checked the wiring, adjusted the carburetor, or cleaned the spark plugs, the engine refused to purr the way it usually did. Frustration crept into his expression as he wiped grease-streaked hands on a rag. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, glaring at the stubborn machine. For once, money couldn't solve the problem. He'd already tried hiring mechanics, but none of them could figure out what was wrong either. As he stood there, scratching his head and wondering if he'd have to take the car apart entirely, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir?" Charles turned around to see a young girl standing a few feet away. She couldn't have been older than 10, dressed in a faded denim jacket that was slightly too big for her frame. Her curly hair bounced lightly in the breeze, and her wide brown eyes sparkled with curiosity. Clutched tightly in her hands was a toolbox nearly half her size. "Can I help?" she asked simply, tilting her head to get a better look at the car. For a moment, Charles didn't respond. He wasn't used to being approached by strangers, let alone children. This was his private space, where he came to escape the chaos of the world. And yet something about the girl's confident demeanor caught him off guard. Most kids would have been intimidated by a grown man covered in oil and sweat, but not her. She stood there calmly, waiting for his answer as though she'd done this sort of thing before. "I'm not sure you'd understand," Charles said finally, forcing a polite smile. "This is kind of complicated." The girl shrugged, unfazed. "I know cars." Her response surprised him. "You do?" She nodded eagerly. "My grandma taught me. She said fixing cars is like solving a puzzle. You just gotta find the missing piece." Charles hesitated. On one hand, he didn't want to waste time entertaining a child who probably knew nothing beyond changing a tire. On the other hand, he was desperate enough to try anything at this point. Plus, there was something endearing about her determination. Against his better judgment, he stepped aside. "All right, kid. Show me what you've got." Without hesitation, the girl set down her toolbox and opened it. Inside were wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, and other tools arranged neatly in their designated spots. Charles raised an eyebrow. Whoever this girl was, she clearly took her work seriously. "What's your name?" he asked as she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. "Maya," she replied, grabbing a flashlight and peering inside the engine compartment. "And yours?" "Charles." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Charles." He chuckled softly. "Just Charles is fine." Maya nodded absently, already focused on diagnosing the issue. She moved methodically, inspecting each component with surprising precision. At one point, she paused, furrowing her brow as she examined the carburetor. She murmured thoughtfully. "What?" Charles prompted, leaning closer. "This might be the problem," she said, pointing to a tiny crack in the carburetor housing. "It's leaking fuel vapor, which is why the engine won't run smoothly." Charles blinked in astonishment. How had he missed that? He'd gone over every inch of the engine multiple times, yet somehow this detail had escaped him. "Are you sure?" he asked skeptically. "Positive," Maya replied, pulling out a replacement part from her toolbox. "We can fix it, but we'll need to drain the gas tank first." Over the next hour, they worked together seamlessly. Maya directed Charles on what to do, her instructions clear and concise. Together, they replaced the damaged carburetor and cleaned out the fuel lines. By the time they finished, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, painting everything in warm, golden hues. Charles turned the key in the ignition, holding his breath. To his immense relief, the engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. A grin spread across his face as he revved the throttle a few times. "You did it!" he exclaimed, turning to Maya. "How did you learn to do all that?" "My grandma," she repeated, closing her toolbox. "She used to say cars are like people. They tell you what's wrong if you listen hard enough." "Well, I owe you big time," Charles said sincerely. "What can I do to thank you?" Maya smiled shyly. "You don't have to do anything. I just like helping." As she started to walk away, Charles noticed something glinting on her finger. It was a ring, silver, and intricately engraved with symbols he didn't recognize. Curious, he called after her. "Hey, Maya, what's that ring you're wearing?" She glanced down at her hand, her expression softening. "It's special," she said quietly. "My grandma gave it to me before she passed away." Before Charles could ask anything else, Maya waved goodbye and disappeared down the street, leaving him staring after her. There was something about the way she spoke about the ring, something almost reverent, that lingered in his mind long after she was gone. Little did he know that simple encounter would set off a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. The next morning, Charles woke up with the image of Maya's ring still fresh in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about it. The symbols etched into the silver band were unlike anything he'd ever seen before, delicate yet intricate, almost as if they told a story. It wasn't just curiosity that kept him thinking about it. There was an odd pull, like the ring had left an impression on him somehow. After breakfast, Charles decided to do some research. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop and typing keywords into the search bar: ancient rings, engraved symbols, and mysterious artifacts. At first, nothing useful came up, just pictures of jewelry and random designs. But then, buried deep in the results, he found something interesting. A website dedicated to lost civilizations mentioned a group of people who supposedly crafted objects imbued with extraordinary properties. The description included symbols similar to those on Maya's ring. Charles leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. Could it be possible? Was this more than just a family heirloom? His rational side told him not to jump to conclusions, but his imagination ran wild. What if the ring really did hold some kind of power? And if it did, why would Maya's grandmother give it to her? That night, Charles went to bed early, hoping to clear his head, but sleep didn't bring relief. In fact, it brought something far stranger. He dreamed vividly, though the details were hazy when he woke up. In the dream, he saw glowing symbols swirling around him, pulsing with light. They seemed alive, shifting and changing shape as if trying to communicate. Alongside the visuals came whispers, a soft melodic language he didn't understand but felt oddly familiar. When Charles opened his eyes, his heart was racing. The room was dark and silent, but the memory of the dream lingered, leaving him unsettled. He reached for his phone on the nightstand and checked the time. It was only 3 a.m, too early to start the day but too late to fall back asleep. Instead, he grabbed his laptop again and returned to the website he'd found earlier. This time he dug deeper, reading everything he could about the civilization mentioned in the article. According to the site, these people were said to have possessed advanced knowledge of energy and matter, abilities far beyond what modern science understood. Their artifacts, including rings like the one Maya wore, were rumored to grant special powers to their bearers. However, the article also warned that such relics often attracted danger, drawing attention from those who sought to exploit their potential. By sunrise, Charles felt torn between fascination and concern. On one hand, the idea of ancient technology intrigued him. It aligned with his lifelong interest in innovation and discovery. On the other hand, the warnings gave him pause. If the ring truly held significance, then Maya might be in over her head without even realizing it. Over the next few days, Charles kept an eye out for Maya. He wasn't sure why, but he felt compelled to check on her. Maybe it was guilt for prying into her personal life, or maybe it was the lingering unease from his dream. Either way, he wanted to make sure she was okay. His chance came sooner than expected. One afternoon, while driving through town, he spotted her walking along the sidewalk, her toolbox slung over her shoulder. Pulling over, he rolled down the window and called out, "Hey, Maya." She turned, surprised to see him. "Oh, hi, Mr. Charles." "Just Charles, remember?" he corrected with a smile. "How are you doing?" "I'm good," she replied, adjusting the strap of her toolbox. "Just heading home. Do you want a ride?" he offered. Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, thanks." As they drove, Charles tried to strike up a conversation. "So, where'd you learn so much about cars?" "My grandma," she said simply. "She worked as a mechanic. Before she retired, she always said it was important to know how things work." "That's impressive," Charles said. "Not many kids your age would spend their time learning about engines." Maya shrugged. "I like it. Plus, it makes me feel close to her." There was a brief silence before Charles decided to broach the subject of the ring. "You know, I've been thinking about that ring you showed me. It's really unique." Maya glanced down at her hand, her fingers tracing the engraved symbols. "It's special," she said softly. "Grandma said it chooses its bearer." "What does that mean?" Charles asked, careful to keep his tone casual. Maya hesitated, as if debating whether to share more. Finally, she spoke. "She said the ring has a history. It belonged to someone important a long time ago. Someone who could do things most people can't." "Like what?" Charles pressed gently. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "She never told me exactly. Just that it's powerful and that I should take care of it." Charles nodded thoughtfully. Her words confirmed his suspicions. The ring was no ordinary object. But he also sensed that Maya didn't fully understand its significance herself. Whether out of protection or secrecy, her grandmother had left her with only fragments of the truth. When they arrived at Maya's house, Charles parked outside and turned to her. "Listen, Maya, if you ever need help with anything or if you want to talk more about the ring, you can always call me, okay?" Maya smiled faintly. "Thanks, Charles. I appreciate it." As she climbed out of the car, Charles watched her walk up the driveway and disappear inside. He stayed there for a moment, lost in thought. Something about the situation felt bigger than he could grasp, and he knew he wouldn't be able to let it go anytime soon. Later that evening, Charles decided to reach out to an old acquaintance, Dr. Emily Carter, a professor of archaeology at a nearby university. Though they hadn't spoken in years, he remembered her passion for ancient cultures and mysterious artifacts. After exchanging pleasantries over the phone, he explained what he'd learned about the ring. "Interesting," Emily said after hearing his description. "Those symbols sound familiar, but I'll need to see them in person to confirm." "I can arrange that," Charles replied. "But there's something else. I think the girl wearing the ring might not realize its full potential." Emily paused. "If it's what I think it is, then you're right to be cautious. These kinds of artifacts tend to attract trouble. Keep an eye on her, Charles, and whatever you do, don't let anyone else find out about it until we know more." Her warning echoed in Charles's mind long after they hung up. For now, all he could do was wait and observe. But one thing was certain: the ring, and Maya, were tied to something far greater than either of them realized. The days that followed were a mix of anticipation and unease for Charles. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya and the ring, replaying their conversations in his mind. Dr. Emily Carter had promised to look into the symbols further, but it would take time. In the meantime, Charles decided to get to know Maya better. If the ring was as significant as he suspected, he wanted to make sure she felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her understand its mysteries. One afternoon, Charles drove to Maya's neighborhood with a plan. He parked near her house and walked up to the door, carrying a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Before he could knock, Maya opened the door, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Charles!" she exclaimed, clearly surprised. What are you doing here? I brought you something, he said, holding out the box. It's not much, but I thought you'd like it. Maya took the box hesitantly and unwrapped it. Inside was a shiny new wrench set, each tool gleaming under the sunlight. Her face broke into a wide grin. Wow, this is awesome, thank you. You're welcome, Charles replied with a smile. I figured you deserved an upgrade after helping me fix my Mustang. Maya laughed, clutching the box tightly. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, Charles said. Besides, I was hoping we could hang out sometime, maybe work on another project together. Maya's expression softened. I'd like that. Over the next few weeks, Charles made an effort to spend more time with Maya. They worked on various projects in his garage where he kept several other vintage cars. Each session gave him a chance to learn more about her likes, dislikes, and the little details that made her who she was. She told him stories about her grandmother, describing her as kind but strict, someone who believed in self-reliance and hard work. She taught me everything, Maya said one day while they were fixing an old Chevy truck. Not just about cars, but about life too. She always said, if you can figure out how something works, you'll never be helpless. Charles nodded, impressed by the wisdom behind the words. She sounds like an amazing woman. She was. Maya agreed quietly. For a moment, sadness flickered across her face, but she quickly shook it off. Anyway, let's finish this before it gets dark. As their friendship grew, Charles noticed subtle changes in Maya's behavior. Sometimes she seemed distracted, as if lost in thought. Other times she moved with an uncanny precision, completing tasks faster than anyone her age should. Once, when a wrench slipped from her hand, it hovered in midair for a split second before falling back down. Charles froze, staring at her in disbelief. Did you see that? He asked cautiously. Maya looked away, avoiding his gaze. See what? The wrench, it floated. It must have been your imagination, she said quickly, though her voice wavered slightly. Charles didn't push the issue, but the incident stayed with him. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. And yet, instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of wonder. Could the ring really be influencing her? Was it unlocking ability she hadn't known she possessed? A few days later, Charles received a call from Dr. Emily Carter. Her tone was urgent. Charles, I need to see you right away. What's going on? He asked, concern creeping into his voice. I found something about the ring, she replied cryptically, but it's better if we discuss it in person. They met at a quiet cafe downtown. Over coffee, Emily spread out a series of photographs and documents on the table. These symbols match those on the ring, she explained, pointing to intricate patterns etched onto ancient stones. They belong to a civilization known as the Aterni, a group rumored to have mastered energy manipulation thousands of years ago. Aterni? Charles repeated, frowning. Never heard of them. That's because most people dismiss their existence as myth, Emily said, but recent discoveries suggest otherwise. According to legend, the Aterni created artifacts imbued with extraordinary powers. These objects were meant to protect humanity during times of crisis. And you think Maya's ring is one of these artifacts? Charles asked. Emily nodded. It fits the description. But there's a catch. The power comes at a cost. Those who wield the artifacts often become targets. Throughout history, countless groups have sought to control them, believing they hold the key to ultimate power. Charles leaned back in his chair, processing the information. So, if someone finds out about the ring, they'll come after Maya, Emily finished grimly. And they won't stop until they get what they want. The weight of her words hit Charles like a punch to the gut. He had suspected the ring was special, but he hadn't imagined it could put Maya in danger. Is there any way to protect her? We need to keep it hidden, Emily said firmly. No one can know about it. Not even Maya, if possible. The less she understands, the safer she'll be. Charles shook his head. That's not going to work. She already knows it's special. Trying to hide it from her will only make things worse, Emily sighed. Then we'll have to prepare her, teach her how to use its power responsibly, and defend herself if necessary. When Charles returned home, he found himself pacing the living room, his mind racing. How could he explain all this to Maya without scaring her? More importantly, how could he ensure her safety without taking away her freedom? The next day, he invited Maya over again, this time with a different purpose. As they sat in the garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, Charles decided to be honest. "Maya, I need to talk to you about the ring." Her expression turned serious. "What about it?" "I've been doing some research," he began carefully, "and I think it's more than just a family heirloom. It might have abilities." Maya stared at him, her brow furrowed. "Abilities?" "Yes," Charles said. "Like the ones your grandma talked about. Abilities that could change the world or attract trouble." For a long moment, Maya didn't respond. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I think I knew that already. Things have been different lately." "What do you mean?" Charles asked gently. She hesitated, then admitted, "Sometimes I feel like I can do things I shouldn't be able to, like moving stuff without touching it or knowing what's wrong with a car just by looking at it. At first I thought I was imagining it, but now it's real." Charles finished for her. Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "What does it mean?" "It means you're special," Charles said. "But it also means you'll need to be careful. There are people out there who might try to take the ring from you. People who don't care about right or wrong, they just want power." Maya swallowed hard. "What should I do?" "We'll figure it out together," Charles promised. "You're not alone in this, Maya. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." As they sat there, the bond between them grew stronger. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to trust someone outside her family. And Charles, despite the uncertainty ahead, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But deep down, both knew the hardest part was yet to come. Over the next few weeks, life in the small town outside Atlanta seemed to carry on as usual. The sun rose and set, people went about their daily routines, and the hum of activity continued uninterrupted. But beneath the surface, things were changing, for Charles and Maya especially. Their partnership had evolved into something deeper, a shared mission to understand the ring and protect its secrets. Yet, as they delved further into the mystery, strange occurrences began to ripple through the town, hinting at forces far beyond their control. It started subtly. One morning, Charles noticed that his phone wouldn't charge no matter how many times he plugged it in. At first, he thought it was a faulty cable or adapter, but when he tried a different charger, the problem persisted. Later that day, while working in his garage, he realized none of his power tools were functioning properly. The drills sputtered, the lights flickered, and even the radio cut in and out. Frustrated, he called an electrician, only to be told there was nothing wrong with the wiring in his house. Around the same time, similar reports began surfacing across the town. Neighbors complained about appliances short-circuiting, streetlights blinking erratically, and car engines stalling without warning. Some dismissed the incidents as coincidences, blaming old infrastructure or bad weather. Others whispered about more supernatural explanations, though no one could agree on what exactly was happening. Charles couldn't ignore the pattern. Each disturbance seemed to center around Maya. Whenever she visited his garage or walked through the neighborhood, something odd inevitably occurred. Once, while they were testing the Mustang's engine, the car suddenly roared to life on its own, even though the keys weren't in the ignition. Another time, a stack of metal tools levitated briefly before clattering to the ground. Maya herself seemed unaware of these events, or perhaps she was simply choosing not to acknowledge them. One evening, after another inexplicable incident, Charles decided to confront her. "Maya, we need to talk," he said gently, sitting beside her on the workbench. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" She hesitated, picking at the hem of her jacket. "Like what?" "Things moving by themselves, power going out, stuff like that." Maya sighed, her shoulders sagging. "Yeah, I've noticed. It's been happening a lot." "Do you think it has something to do with the ring?" Charles asked. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe. But I don't know how to stop it. You're not alone in this, Charles reminded her. We'll figure it out together. Despite his reassurance, Charles couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The disturbances were growing more frequent and more intense. One night as he lay in bed, he heard a loud crash from outside. Rushing to the window, he saw a tree in his front yard split cleanly in half, as though struck by lightning. Except, the sky was clear, and there hadn't been a storm. The next morning, Charles received a call from Dr. Emily Carter. Her voice was tense. Charles, I think we have a problem. What is it? He asked, bracing himself for bad news. There's been chatter online, forums, social media, the works. People are talking about the disturbances in your area. Some claim it's proof of paranormal activity. Others say it's linked to ancient artifacts. Charles frowned. How did anyone find out? I don't know, Emily admitted. But word is spreading fast, and where there's smoke, there's fire. Someone might already be onto you, and Maya. The warning came true sooner than expected. A few days later, Charles arrived home to find a black sedan parked outside his driveway. Two men in suits stood near the vehicle, scanning the area with sharp, calculating eyes. They didn't look like locals. Their polished shoes and expensive watches marked them as outsiders. As Charles approached, one of them stepped forward. Mr. Whitman? The man asked, his tone polite but firm. Yes, Charles replied cautiously. Can I help you? We represent a private organization interested in certain phenomena occurring in this region, the man explained. We believe you may have information relevant to our investigation. What kind of phenomena? Charles asked, playing dumb. The man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Near us, a streetlight flickered violently, drawing his attention. Unusual energy surges, electrical malfunctions, unexplained events. Surely you've noticed, Charles forced a laugh. Sounds like you're describing every other Tuesday around here. Old wiring, you know how it is. The man's smile faded, replaced by a steely expression. Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Whitman. We know about the girl, the one with the ring. Hand her over and we'll leave quietly. Refuse and things could get messy. For a moment, Charles felt his blood run cold. He had feared this moment, but now that it was here, he refused to back down. I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about. The man stared at him for a long moment, then nodded to his partner. Very well, but remember this, we always get what we want. As they climbed back into the sedan and drove away, Charles exhaled deeply, his heart pounding. He knew they'd be back, and next time they wouldn't ask nicely. Later that evening, Charles called Maya to warn her. When she arrived at his house, her face was pale with worry. What do we do now? She asked, clutching the edge of the kitchen table. We prepare, Charles said firmly. You're not going anywhere without me, and we're going to make sure those men never get close to you. He spent the rest of the night fortifying his property, installing security cameras and motion sensors. He also reached out to Daniel Brooks, a retired detective and one of his closest friends. Daniel had spent decades solving cases, and if anyone could help them stay safe, it was him. When Daniel arrived the next morning, Charles filled him in on everything, the ring, the disturbances, the mysterious men. To his credit, Daniel listened without interrupting, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. This is serious, he said finally. If these guys are as dangerous as you say, we'll need to be ready for anything. Together, the three of them devised a plan. They would keep Maya hidden during the day, alternating between Charles's house and Daniel's secluded cabin in the woods. At night, they would monitor the area for signs of intruders. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. As the days passed, tension mounted. The disturbances grew worse, affecting larger areas of the town. Streetlights exploded, cars refused to start, and electronic devices malfunctioned en masse. Rumors spread like wildfire, drawing curious onlookers and opportunists alike. Among them were members of the shadowy organization, who began patrolling the streets in search of Maya. One afternoon, while hiding out at Daniel's cabin, Maya broke down in tears. "Why is this happening to me?" she sobbed. "I didn't ask for any of this." Charles knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "None of this is your fault, Maya. You're just caught in the middle of something bigger than all of us, but I promise we'll get through it together." Maya wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "What if they catch me? What if they take the ring?" "They won't," Charles said firmly. "Not as long as I'm still standing." Though his words brought some comfort, Charles knew the truth. The battle was only beginning. The organization wouldn't give up easily, and neither would Maya's powers. As the stakes grew higher, so did the risks. But deep down, Charles believed in one thing, that no matter what happened, they would face it head-on, side by side. The tension in the small town reached its breaking point. Strange occurrences that had once been isolated incidents now dominated daily life. Power outages struck without warning, and bursts of energy seemed to ripple through the air like invisible waves. People whispered about curses and supernatural forces, but Charles, Maya, and Daniel knew better. They understood that the source of the chaos was much closer to home, or rather it was Maya herself. Despite their best efforts to keep her hidden, the mysterious organization grew bolder. Surveillance cameras caught glimpses of black sedans, cruising slowly down residential streets, their occupants scanning every house with cold precision. Flyers appeared around town offering rewards for information about unusual activity. Charles recognized the thinly veiled threat behind the words. They were looking for Maya. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Charles stood at the window of Daniel's cabin, staring out into the darkening woods. Maya sat on the couch inside, wrapped in a blanket, while Daniel paced nervously near the door. The three of them had spent the past few days holed up together, trying to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. But even in this remote location, they couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. "We can't keep running forever," Daniel said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was low but firm. "They'll find us eventually." Charles turned to face him, his expression grim. "Then we fight." Maya looked up sharply, her eyes wide with alarm. "Fight? Against who? We don't even know what they want. They want you and the ring," Charles replied gently. "And they won't stop until they get what they're after. But we're not going to let that happen." Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. "If it comes to a confrontation, we'll need a plan, something that gives us the upper hand." Over the next hour, the three of them worked out a strategy. Using Charles's resources, they gathered supplies, flashlights, walkie-talkies, and makeshift barriers to fortify the cabin. Daniel suggested setting traps along the perimeter of the property, using tripwires and alarms to alert them if anyone approached. Meanwhile, Charles focused on teaching Maya how to control her growing abilities. "Try to focus," Charles instructed during one practice session. He placed a small wrench on the table between them. "Imagine lifting it without touching it." Maya closed her eyes, furrowing her brow in concentration. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the wrench began to tremble. It hovered an inch off the table before clattering back down. "That was amazing," Charles exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "You're getting stronger." But Maya didn't share his enthusiasm. "What if I hurt someone?" she asked quietly. "What if I lose control?" "You won't," Charles assured her. "Not as long as you stay calm and trust yourself. These powers are part of you now, Maya. You just have to learn how to use them wisely." As the days passed, Maya practiced tirelessly, determined to master her newfound abilities. Each success brought a flicker of confidence, but each failure reminded her of the danger she posed, not just to herself, but to everyone around her. Still, she refused to give up. If the ring had chosen her, then she owed it to herself and to those who believed in her to rise to the challenge. Late one night, the inevitable finally happened. A soft rustling sound outside snapped Charles awake. Grabbing a flashlight, he crept to the window and peered into the darkness. Shadows moved among the trees, barely visible beneath the pale glow of the moon. Someone was out there. "Wake up," he hissed, shaking Daniel awake. "They're here." Within moments, the three of them sprang into action. Charles and Daniel armed themselves with whatever tools they could find: baseball bats, crowbars, anything that might serve as a weapon. Maya stayed close to them, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her blanket. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the woods. One of the tripwires had been triggered, sending a flare shooting into the sky. The bright light illuminated the clearing around the cabin, revealing several figures advancing steadily toward them. Their faces were obscured by masks, but their intentions were clear. "Stay behind me," Charles ordered, positioning himself between Maya and the intruders. Daniel flanked them, gripping a heavy wrench tightly in his hand. The leader of the group stepped forward, raising a hand to signal his companions to halt. "This doesn't have to end badly," he said, his voice calm but menacing. "Give us the girl and no one gets hurt." "You're not taking her," Charles shot back, his tone steely. The man sighed, feigning disappointment. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable, but if you insist." Before he could finish his sentence, Maya stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "Leave us alone," she shouted, her voice ringing out like a command. To everyone's astonishment, the ground beneath the intruders' feet began to tremble violently. Roots erupted from the earth, twisting and coiling around their legs, pinning them in place. Several men stumbled backward, shouting in panic as the forest itself seemed to come alive against them. "What is this?" the leader demanded, struggling to free himself. "Stop it! I'm not doing this!" Maya cried, her hands pressed to her temples as tears streamed down her face. "I don't know how to stop it." Charles grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Breathe, Maya, focus, you're in control." Slowly, the trembling subsided, and the roots receded back into the ground. The intruders scrambled to their feet, retreating into the woods without another word. For a moment, all was silent. Daniel exhaled deeply, lowering his makeshift weapon. That was something else. Maya collapsed onto the porch steps, shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know I could do that." "It's okay," Charles said, kneeling beside her. "You protected us, that's what matters." But despite their victory, none of them felt safe. The organization would regroup and return, angrier and more desperate than ever. And Maya's powers, though impressive, were still unpredictable. They needed a way to end this permanently. The next morning, Charles called Dr. Emily Carter, explaining everything that had happened. "There has to be a way to stop them," he pleaded. "Something we haven't thought of yet." Emily hesitated, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "There is one option, but it's risky. According to legend, the ring's power can only be neutralized by returning it to its origin, a sacred site tied to the Eterni civilization." "And where is that?" Charles asked. "No one knows for sure," Emily admitted. "But if you can decipher the symbols on the ring, they might lead you to the answer." With no other options left, Charles and Maya set to work studying the engravings. Hours turned into days as they pored over ancient texts and maps, searching for clues. Finally, after countless dead ends, they discovered a pattern, a series of coordinates etched subtly into the design. "It's pointing west," Charles realized, tracing the lines with his finger. "Somewhere in the desert." Maya nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then that's where we need to go." Though the journey ahead would be dangerous, neither of them hesitated. Together, they packed their belongings and prepared to leave under the cover of darkness. With Daniel watching their backs, they slipped out of the cabin and headed toward the unknown. As the miles stretched out before them, Maya glanced down at the ring on her finger, its symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. She didn't know what awaited them at the end of their journey, but one thing was certain: she would face it head-on, no matter the cost. The road stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the vast expanse of desert. Charles drove steadily, his hands gripping the wheel of the Mustang as the sun blazed overhead. Beside him, Maya sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The ring on her finger gleamed faintly, its symbols pulsing with a soft light that seemed to grow stronger the farther they traveled. For hours, neither of them spoke. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, mingling with the dry heat of the desert. They had no idea what awaited them at the coordinates etched into the ring, only that it was their best chance to put an end to the chaos. Every mile brought them closer to answers, but also to danger. The shadowy organization wouldn't give up easily, and both Charles and Maya knew they were being followed. "We're almost there," Charles said finally, breaking the silence. He glanced at the GPS mounted on the dashboard. "Another hour or so." Maya nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Do you think this will work? Will it really stop everything?" "I don't know," Charles admitted, "but we have to try. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." His words brought a small measure of comfort, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. She had never asked for any of this, the powers, the danger, the responsibility. But here she was, carrying the fate of something far greater than herself. For a moment she wished she could go back to the simplicity of her old life, when fixing cars and helping her grandma were her biggest concerns. As the Mustang continued its journey, the landscape began to change. The barren desert gave way to rocky cliffs and jagged formations, their shadows stretching long across the ground. The air grew cooler, and the hum of the engine echoed eerily off the stone walls surrounding them. Finally, they reached the destination marked by the coordinates. It was a secluded valley hidden between towering rock faces, its floor covered in ancient ruins. Crumbling stone pillars stood like sentinels, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns that matched the symbols on Maya's ring. At the center of the site was a circular platform, etched with grooves that formed a perfect replica of the ring's design. "This is it," Charles murmured, parking the car nearby. He stepped out cautiously, his eyes scanning the area for signs of trouble. "It has to be." Maya joined him, clutching the ring tightly in her hand. "What do I do now?" "Follow your instincts," Charles said gently. "You've come this far. Trust yourself." Taking a deep breath, Maya approached the platform. As she placed the ring onto the grooved surface, a low rumble reverberated through the valley. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the symbols on the ring began to glow brighter, casting an ethereal light over the ruins. Suddenly a voice filled the air, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in their minds. It was melodic, yet commanding, speaking in a language neither of them understood. Yet somehow its meaning became clear. "You are the chosen bearer," the voice said. "The power within you is bound to the balance of creation and destruction. Choose wisely, for your decision will shape the future." Maya froze, her heart pounding. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "It's asking you to make a choice," Charles replied, his voice steady despite the awe in his eyes. "To keep the ring or let it go forever." Maya hesitated, torn between two paths. Keeping the ring meant embracing her powers fully, unlocking abilities beyond her imagination. But it also meant living under constant threat, pursued by those who sought to exploit her gifts. Letting it go would restore peace to the world, but it would also sever her connection to something extraordinary, a piece of her identity she wasn't ready to part with. After what felt like an eternity, Maya made her decision. She closed her eyes and focused, channeling all her strength into a single thought. "I choose peace," she said softly. The light from the ring flared brilliantly, engulfing the entire valley in a radiant glow. When it faded, the ruins were silent once more, the platform empty. The ring was gone. Charles approached Maya, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all." Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. Though she felt a pang of loss, she also felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." As they drove away from the valley, the desert seemed quieter, calmer. The disturbances that had plagued the town and the world were gone, leaving behind only the memory of what had transpired. For the first time in weeks, Charles allowed himself to relax, knowing that Maya was safe. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. The townspeople celebrated the end of the strange events, unaware of the sacrifices that had been made to restore balance. Maya resumed her routine, spending her days tinkering with cars and helping neighbors. Yet she carried the lessons she had learned with her, a newfound sense of courage and resilience. One afternoon, as she worked on a neighbor's truck, Charles stopped by to check on her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, leaning against the hood of the vehicle. "I'm okay," Maya replied with a smile. "Better than okay, actually. I feel free." Charles grinned. "That's good to hear. You've earned it." They shared a quiet moment, the bond between them stronger than ever. Though the adventure had ended, their friendship remained, a testament to the trust and support they had given each other during their darkest hours. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maya looked down at her hand. The ring was gone, but its legacy lived on, not just in her memories but in the choices she had made and the person she had become. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly hopeful about the future.